good place now. You are listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, I'm talking about getting our hopes up. How often do we just not get our hopes up anymore because we've been let down in the past? You know, it's interesting when we were a kid and we have this great news. You know, we get this news that something's going to happen. This great thing's going to happen. We get all happy and excited. We're so happy. And it's amazing and it's great. And then it seems like as we get older, we feel that same excitement and then we get let down. Something happens. Things don't go our way. And we end up feeling, well, kind of bad. And so we begin to develop a new way of dealing with things. We just don't get our hopes up anymore. We really don't think about it. And if we're going after something, we have a tendency of, well, really not fully committing, not really getting energetic about it, so that if it doesn't happen, we go, well, see, there you go. Didn't happen again for me. It's the way my life's been. Or if it does happen, we're happy for a moment, and then we kind of forget about it because we're waiting to the next thing. And I've found that when we get like this, we get out of the moment. When we get like this, we're no longer in the moment enjoying our life. We're just kind of looking for the next thing, and if that happens, great. If not, but we're never really getting any sort of emotional lift from these things. In one degree, that's good, but in one degree, that signifies that we're not truly living our life and feeling that emotion and that connection and being mindful and being in the moment, because we're rushing through things in fear of not getting what we want, in fear of not getting the accolade, in fear of getting a no. And so on today's show, I'm going to be talking about what we can do to get our lives, ways we can actually get our lives back into the moment, get back and enjoying our life, find more fulfillment in our life. And I think the interesting concept is that it's becoming more like a child. When we were a kid, we were energetic and happy, and we were loving life. I mean, for the most part. I mean, some of us had some challenging childhood upbringings. I'm not going to, but at the same point in time, some of our childhood was good for sure, for most of us. And I remember as a child, like you getting gifts on Christmas where I played more with the box that the gift came in than the actual gift. I remember hanging out with my dog and having the best time. I remember learning how to cook something from one of my parents and feeling really great about this new thing that I could do, this new acquired talent that I learned. And so I feel like when we get older and older, and as we get more no's, and as we get more things that fall by the wayside that we really wish would have happened because we really were looking forward to that, I think that we really lose that je ne sais quoi, that awesome feeling, and we lose being in the moment. I've gotten my hopes up, and I've seen my hopes and dreams shattered right in front of my very eyes. I think many of you have felt the same way. You get your hopes up, you get wrapped up about something. And, honestly, personally, I stopped getting energetic about stuff. I stopped getting my hopes up about things. And, it's interesting because, from my own personal life, when it comes to achievements and goals, when things happen or don't, I remember when things wouldn't happen when I was in a period of, I think all of us have been in a place where things just didn't go our way for a while. And it felt like the world was against you, right? And as the more and more you felt that way, and the more beating down you did of the internal negative dialogue in your head about how this is never going to work and I'm never going to be successful thing, right? When all that was going on, when things didn't happen, you'd just be like, it's par for the course. That's just the way that's just the way it is, It seems to be my luck lately. All the cliches, all the comments we say when we really want to cry out loud and scream like a child. But, it's interesting when I look at the flip side and when the opportunity would actually happen, when things would actually work out, I would at first almost be taken off guard because I wouldn't allow myself to get my hopes up. Because I didn't want to see the other shoe fall. I didn't want to deal with that. You know how you get to that point where you're like, I just can't do it. Just can't get my hopes up. I mean, I really, really want to, but I just know the last times I have, it's been hell. And it's interesting because I would be happy for a moment. At first off, kind of eyes glazed over, didn't really know. Whoa, wow, a little taken aback, and then I was happy, and I was truly happy for maybe a minute. Maybe a minute. And then all of a sudden, I was thinking about the next thing. And it really took the joy right out of life on things that you achieve. And at first, I thought I was just being a responsible person. No expectations. Get back into the groove. Get back into the work grind. Focus, focus, focus. And I've always been into that grind, focus. I've realized that there's a little bit of time that you got to pull yourself out of that and really see things. Yes, we all have to work. And sometimes the hours can be grueling, but we do it for a reason. We do it to impact. We do it to change the world. We do it to be able to afford to do the things that we can do to impact the universe in an amazing way. But I realized that the more and more I tempered, the more and more I dampened my hopes, the more and more I got out of the moment of when things actually did work. And it's interesting because that getting your hopes up thing, not getting your hopes up, better yet, became something that became, I guess, commonplace in my life. So it wasn't just about accolades, or maybe I would enter, a contest on a screenplay that I wrote, or maybe, somebody nominated me for a leadership award. It wasn't something like that only. It started like that. And then it began to gradually increase in my daily life. So instead of just sticking with the accolades and the possible awards, and after you don't make a certain amount of those after a while, that starts getting pretty depressing. But then you start moving into other places in your life. A good example is vacations. I know that for many of us, vacations can be few and far between sometimes. And so we really, really, really want the vacation to be the absolute best vacation we've ever had. We don't have a lot of them. We don't want it to be like horrible. We don't want to have that bad experience, where everybody gets sick on the trip and, nobody leaves the bathroom thing or it's just not a good place, or the hotel is, 60 years older than what it shows in the pictures, whatever. And you begin to not get in the moment there because you don't want to get your hopes up either. You begin to not want to get your hopes up on anything. Meeting people, new opportunities, new adventures, events, vacations, nothing. Because you start thinking, if I start getting my hopes up, something bad's going to go down, okay? And it's not going to work out. And I'm going to be left holding the bag, and I'm going to have all these high expectations and high hopes, and it's going to all fall apart. And I think that when we're getting our hopes up, I consider that to be a lot like expectations. And they kind of go hand in hand, but they're not the same. Because I think hope is a derivative of being hopeful, of a hopeful future. Hopefully something will happen that will better our lives. Hopefully this will take place and this will help me to provide for my family. Or hopefully this will take place and I'll be able to save my life or be healthy again. Or maybe I'll get this opportunity to have this medical treatment that I didn't have the opportunity for, and this is going to change my life forever. And, I find that a lot of us are betting on these big hopes, and some of us are just too scared to. And there's a lot of reasons and a lot of psychology behind all this. Because I think that, not only is it a cycle, but it's also predicated on the past of what happened before. It's like the Supreme Court, how they agree or disagree with something. Was it precedents? Are we following precedents? Are we following precedents when it comes to our life? Do we kind of get stuck in the humdrumness of, well, it hadn't happened for me yet. Everybody else seems to be getting all this stuff, and here I am left holding the bag. And I'm not making light of that at all. Because I know what it's like to look around and to see everybody it seems like is having all these success stories. and you feel like nothing good is happening to you. Maybe the success story are some of your friends that were able to have children, or other friends of yours are having successful job opportunities, or some of your friends are having the best health possible. Whatever it is, all of us are looking to be successful in our lives, and some of us are really looking at certain specific areas, while some of us are looking for an overall healthy lifestyle. But many of us have been hurt. We've seen our dreams fall apart, or the things that we hope for not come to fruition. And if you've been in that position where things that you've hoped for have fallen by the wayside, and you've gotten to the point where you become numb in these situations, you can't miss this show. So stay tuned, and I'll be right back. Live Your True Life Perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. I'll be back this time in 2 shakes.
I'm learning to fly.
Turn it up and jump in the deep end on Perspectives. Now, here's Ashley.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, I'm talking about getting our hopes up. Getting our hopes up, and how many times have you gotten your hopes up and been let down? And nowadays, instead of getting your hopes up anymore, you just don't. And because you don't want to do it because you're too scared to, because what happens if it doesn't happen again? And so we kind of get out of the moment. We kind of become numb to the situation. There might be a little anger and resentment, but we've moved out of being in the moment because of fear of not having those hopes and dreams realized. Don't miss it later on in the studio. Reginald Harvey joins me later on just in a few minutes. You don't want to miss that. We're going to be talking a lot about what I'm just talking about right now, because it's going to be some powerful stuff. Because remember, many of us have hopes and dreams about very different things. Hopes. Hope that of a family or children. Hopes of a successful career. Hopes of being able to successfully live healthy and a longer life. All kinds of different hopes that we have. Earlier I was talking about the other shoe dropping. A lot of times you hear people, and I've said it myself, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Many of us are waiting for that other shoe to drop, and because we're waiting on it, we're not in the moment anymore, because we're already outside of it, looking at the negative circumstance, overwhelmed. And also that broken record too sometimes doesn't stop, and it keeps telling us about how it's not going to happen for us, and it seems to be coming right from our head. An interesting tidbit of information, I think you might like this, because I didn't know it. I feel like if I didn't know something, maybe you won't know it, maybe you know it. You probably do. I'm probably the one that didn't know it. But apparently back in the day in New York City in the late 19th and 20th centuries, the apartments that were built with bedrooms on top of one another, right? So, obviously the apartments were built, another apartment, one above the other, right? Well, apparently back then in the 19th and early 20th century, it was common to hear your upstairs neighbor take off a shoe. Yeah, I think you're going. You know where I'm going. Your upstairs neighbor to take off a shoe, drop it, and then what? Repeat the action. Waiting for the other shoe to drop. Interesting, right? I thought that would be kind of interesting. But, I remembered I stopped becoming energetic, and I stopped, fueling those hopes because of, fear that my hopes would be let down. And that began to take the joy out of life on all sides. And I began to, when I would get something that I wanted, it would be a very brief couple of minutes of appreciation and then move on. And that's when I started realizing that I started not getting my hopes up about a lot of different things. Whether it was meeting new people or new experiences, because I didn't want to get my hopes up and the experience sucked. I didn't want to meet new people and they were mean to me. I didn't want to go on a vacation and it was horrible, and you don't get to go on vacations that often, so you want it to be good, right? So all these things started mounting up, and I started bringing this concept into all areas of my life. And I think if you've been where I'm at, you understand what I'm talking about. You go on a date, you didn't want to get your hopes up. Oh God, it could be bad. You know, you meet some friends out. The last time you met some friends out wasn't that great. Oh, I'm a little scared. Don't want to get my hopes up. I don't want to get my hopes up on this date. It could be my soulmate, but it could be the spawn. I don't know. And that's what happens. And you start kind of going through life, kind of numbing yourself down. Not dumbing, but numbing yourself down. You heard it here for the first time, folks, right here on Live Your True Life Perspectives. I actually had to write that down right now during the show because that is awesome. Numbing yourself down. We start numbing ourselves down in fear of getting our hopes up and crushed. And I started getting really scared of the word no. Okay? And I don't know about you, but when you start getting scared of the word no, it changes the whole dynamic. Oh, God. When somebody tells you no, it's like you don't really think about all the logistics and all the sides of it. You just think about how bad the no is. I can't believe they said no. I can't believe it. And you're not thinking about it. And no was so scary because no was another indication that my hopes would be squashed on. No was another indication. And I had been taught this, and I had learned this as I grew up, that yes was good and no was bad. Very interesting. Yes was good and no was bad. And when you start living appropriately to that, your life becomes gradually misled. You become more and more misled from reality and more misled from what's right. Because what happens is that you get a no and you want to turn the no to yes. And you want to do it no matter what. Well, we don't realize that a lot of times in life, that no is actually a godsend. That no is actually way better than the yes. Because we actually kind of know where we stand. We can actually close the envelope to the situation. And we're not being basically, carried around telling us that something's going to happen and it's not going to happen. Going a step further to that, I've had people say no to me, and it saved my life. It saved my life. And the no at the time can be horrific. The no at the time can make you stand and literally look at a wall because that no has freaked you out. That no has literally taken the wind out of your sails. That no, at this point in time, as we see it, has ruined our life. And I know that sometimes it does seem that way. Sometimes it's like, I can't believe this person, I can't believe this. This is ruining things. But you know what? Sometimes, and actually all the time, I've realized that the no is actually a good thing. And I've realized lately more than ever that when someone says no, unless unless you're, I don't know, unless it's like a sale or something. But I mean, really, you got to think about it. When someone says no, go to someone else, no matter what it is. Figure it out. Is this the right direction for going at it? Would this thing help me or hurt me? Would this lead me to the path of where I need to go, or would it not? And sometimes it can be hard to see the forest through the trees because it can be really overwhelming. It can be really overwhelming to see the forest through the trees. Because we want to hear those yeses. And then sometimes we get the yeses, and the yeses turn out to not be what we need. We get led down the primrose path. We make bad decisions. We date the wrong people. We might even marry not the best person to marry. And we might not be in a best relationship, and we realize it's toxic. We got to go through it. We got to try to deal with it. We got to try to save what we can. And if we can't, we move on. But that's sometimes where yes gets us. And then sometimes yes gets us in a really great place too. But we have to realize that yes is not always good and no is not always bad. And I started realizing, though, that I was putting a lot of stock into the things, not into my general life, into certain things. So I realized that I was getting my hopes up over certain things. And instead of looking at my life and looking at my life at pure happiness, I saw these things making me better. I saw these things pushing me forward. I saw these things as giving my life meaning. Ooh, that's it. How many of you have seen things, if I just get this thing, or if this just happens to me, or if I just get this job, or if I just get this salary raise or whatever, then my life will have more meaning. It validates me. It makes me feel validated, right? Very conditional stuff here, guys. Very conditional stuff here. If I just achieve this, my life will be good. If I just achieve this, I will be successful. If I just achieve this, I will be a leader. Other people will look up to me. If I just achieve this, I will be well. If I just achieve this, my life will be perfect. If I just. I've been there. I'd like to go out on a limb and say most of you have been there too. And many of us are there right now. So what do we do about it? Well, I'm going to be talking more about that in just a bit. And don't miss, in just a few minutes, Reginald Harvey's going to join me. Reggie Harvey will join me in studio. He's the author of Anatomy of a Patient, a new book on the market that's going to really change the way many of us deal with circumstances in our family and our own health care. It's going to really open our eyes and give us new perspective. Stay tuned. I'll be talking more about getting our hopes up and how to really look at it from a new perspective in just a moment. Live your true life perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess. We'll be back. I'll be back this time, you know it, in 2 shakes.
This is Jake Busey, and you're listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, I'm talking about getting our hopes up. Getting our hopes up and having our hopes and dreams shattered. I think many of us adults have had that on many occasions. And we can remember back when we were a kid, when we used to get our hopes up over all kinds of stuff, and things would be validated, and we'd get it, and it was awesome, and it was like Christmas, it was so cool. And then eventually, all of a sudden, as we were growing up, it was like bam, bam, bam on so many different things. Some things not as important as others. You know, some things really do impact our life on every level. And some things can really be painful, especially in the moment, in the hour, in the day, in the week. And it takes time to let go of some of that stuff. But like I was talking about earlier in the hour, when I was talking about the no thing, it hurt to get no. It hurt to be led down the primrose path. But I've realized that there's a lot more than meets the eye. I realized that there's a lot more than meets the eye. And I found out, and I thought about how sometimes when we've been let down, I wonder if it's preparing us for victory. Perhaps we have to identify and realize how much we actually want something. Perhaps we have to identify the need. Perhaps we have to identify our true feelings to be able to recognize that. And maybe the victory itself and feeling sweet victory wouldn't happen had we not gone through so many trials and tribulations. Joining me live in studio, Reggie Harvey. Reggie is a survivor of a near-fatal illness. He is the author of Anatomy of a Patient, a new book available on Amazon.com, and he's a great friend. Reggie, I'm so glad to have you in studio today. How are you doing?
Ashley, I'm actually doing great. Thank you for asking.
Well, I am impressed because, well, the other night I got a call from you. Would you like to talk about that?
Well, yes, it was 10:15 in the evening, and you know there's a rule that unless it's family, you never call anybody at 10 o'clock because that means somebody died.
Exactly.
But
exactly.
It was 10:15, and I was finishing the first cycle of my peritoneal dialysis. I do that at home. And I got a call from the transplant center, and they were excited to tell me that they had a viable kidney for me. from a 43-year-old non-diabetic, non-smoker, non-drinker. The useful life was estimated to be 25 plus years. They needed me to get to the transplant center within the hour, and so they wanted me to bring my PD machine with me. And so I put my plan in place. I now know how pregnant women feel when it's time, because you have to have everything ready. The bag's packed, all the information, critical information that you need to give people. Your go team has to be ready. So I immediately started making phone calls to the people that had committed to do certain things for me. I called my primary care physician. She was out with her family. Put all this stuff in motion, and then the transplant center called me back 3 times, gave me specific information about what place to go in the hospital, and because it was after hours, I had to go to emergency, and where I was going to park, and what I was going to ask for, and all this stuff we went through. And then at 11 o'clock, they called and said, well, I'm sorry, Mr. Harvey, but we have to rescind the offer of the kidney.
Oh, my God.
A law enforcement friend of mine told me that I was in a state that they call emotional delirium. It's when you have an adrenaline dump, but you're disassociated from your emotional response. I used to call it just being numb. I wasn't excited. I wasn't angry. I was confused. I was all those things at once. The one thing that I was able to hang on to was that I didn't have enough information to understand what had happened. And before I just blew up, which I really wanted to do, I pulled myself back because I knew that the people involved were going to investigate the situation and explain it to me. I did explain to them how disgusted I was that they bothered to call me and make this offer and give me all this information, and then they didn't have their act together. Well, what it turned out is that a safety protocol had been narrowed and adjusted in order to protect against tissue rejection. And this had just happened less than 48 hours before this offer came to me. The problem was that the new protocol didn't get disseminated to the entire transplant team. So everyone was doing what they were supposed to do according to the original protocol. But with this new safety measure in place, it wasn't viable for me to accept this particular kidney.
That's painful. That's painful. That's overwhelming to hear. And I know I agree with you about learning that stuff and understanding that there was more to the story. And obviously that's good that they picked up on that before.
Well, yeah.
How did you feel?
Well, like I said, I was in this numb state.
And all this confusion and this emotion and this adrenaline and this disappointment and this understanding that the right thing was done, was there any silver lining that you can talk about in the situation? And I'm not making light of it, just was there anything that came out of it that was somewhat positive?
Well, yes, there was. There were several things, in fact. The most important was that the people who had committed to take on certain tasks to support me getting to the hospital, looking after my homestead, being with me through the surgery, all of those sorts of things that seem mundane, but you can't arrange them at the last minute. All of those people stepped up to the plate as soon as I called them, and especially when I called them 45 minutes later to tell them, false alarm, sorry, everything goes back to normal. None of them, amazingly, were angry with me. None of them were actually angry with the transplant center. And that's something that I never had considered before, but I realized in that moment, these people upon whom I had entrusted certain critical things had really committed themselves to do what they said they were going to do for me. And they were not looking at being inconvenienced or in any way affronted because of the error.
Well, and I think you see that people really just care.
Yes. including the staff. They were really embarrassed that this had happened, but they learned too, because they learned that even there with their best intentions, attention to detail is critical.
Powerful stuff, Reggie. Well, I look forward to having you back in the studio, and I'm just so glad that you're with us, and this knowledge is powerful. You've been through a lot.
So you take every day in stride. You don't know what each day is going to deliver at your doorstep. There's a wonderful old song, Good Morning Heartache, and it tells the story of a person who's sitting down brewing their first cup of coffee in the morning, and before they drink it, they're having a conversation with the universe and just saying, well, whatever it is that we're going to deal with today, bring it. And you realize that it doesn't have to defeat you. Like my great-grandmother said, stuff happens. And it's not about crying about the stuff that happens. It's always about what's the plan to move forward.
Well said. Well said. You know, powerful talk from Reggie. And, you know, when we get our hopes up like that, with something that's life-changing like that, it can be heartbreaking, and it is. However, in this situation, yes, the protocol could have been different, and yes, they could have had things taken care of prior. But had he gotten that transplant, he wouldn't be with us because it wasn't a match. And it's interesting, these situations, and I hope that, as I was talking about right earlier, that as we get let down sometimes, it prepares us for a victory. It prepares us for a victory, but I think that we have to believe it. We can't just go into it and not believe that we are victorious and not believe that we can win and actually win. We can be our greatest champion and we can be our worst enemy. It's up to us, but we have to know exactly what's going on in our mind, the chatter in our mind that can go one way or another. When I return, I'll be talking about getting hopes up, but better yet, about how we can get back into the moment of living and see these things differently, not be so overwhelmed, not be so terrified, and not be so worried. If you haven't already, check out my website. Go to ashleyburgess.com, Ashley, BERGES.com. You'll find links to all social media as well as my YouTube channel that has video content, new video content every week. Stay tuned. Live your true life perspectives. We'll be back this time in 2 shakes.
You could be my luck.
Get in here. You're listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, I've been talking about getting our hopes up, how we've gotten our hopes up in the past and how things just didn't work out, and because of that, we have a tendency of, not ever getting our hopes up and letting things kind of pass us by, and even when we are successful and we do achieve something, it doesn't last for very long, and we're looking for the next thing to do. You know, I find it very interesting because we have literally felt as though our dreams and hopes have been shattered in the past, we just don't give a lot of credence to the things that we do achieve because we're so worried about not achieving that we want to avoid the pain that we actually avoid the pleasure and the success as well. And so we kind of gloss over everything and actually aren't in that experience to really experience it out of fear of not getting it. Do you see what I'm saying? So out of fear of it not working out, we just don't want to deal with it at all. It's like we're numb. Remember the new thing that I made up? Numbing yourself down. Came up with that on tonight's show. Numbing yourself down. So basically we're numbing ourselves down and we don't want to feel because we don't want to get hurt. So, you know, this show is about solution. There's many solutions. It's about different solutions, opportunities, and options to make things work in our life, to get things to work, to get things to really, really, really work out, and to feel good about that. And I think it's powerful. And so the first solution that I have is to ask yourself, when something doesn't go your way, will this affect me in a year? If you say no, will this affect me in 6 months? And if you say no, will this affect me in 3 months? No, a month. Okay, you get the idea. 2 weeks. We have a life to live. It's interesting. It was funny. I was talking to a couple of students the other day at this school event, and they were wanting to go get a license, a real estate license. They were talking about getting a real estate license, and I was like, "Yeah, it's a great idea." And they were like, "It's about 3 weeks. It's almost like a month." And I was like, "Wow, a month! A month is a long time, right?" And I know in our minds it seems like a long time, but it's really not. And so when we think about timing and how something will or will not affect us based on certain time, it really puts things in perspective, because really look at the grand scheme of things. Look at the grand scheme of things. I've been on the radio since 2012. It's 2019 now. I mean, that's a long time. I remember after the first 100 shows, I was like, whoa, that's a lot of shows. Well, yeah, a lot of shows. I mean, think about, will it really impact your life? And I think that really puts it in perspective of getting over things faster. Getting over things faster, really putting value on certain things and understanding. The second thing that I think is very important is to remind yourself about the yes and no controversy. And I'm going to do a show on the yes or no controversy because I think it's a big deal, because for our whole lives, many of us were brought up and raised. We were around groups of people. We were in school that yes was awesome. Yes was the best. If you got yes, you're awesome. You are doing great. You are winning. And if you got no, well, it's all the opposite. And to realize that this is not true. Sometimes, just like with Reggie's story, no is a lifesaver. Now, no might not be extremely a lifesaver for you, but it can really help you. No could be something that really facilitates something decent in your life, or helps you to keep back on track, or doesn't take you off track. It doesn't hurt you, doesn't kill you. There's a lot of things that no can do. Yes is nice too. But we have to really think about things clearly. And we have to understand that every yes is not necessarily what we need. And we need to realize at our core, we need to be honest with ourselves. What do we want and who we are? And that goes back to my next suggestion of solution, is to really get a hold of our thoughts and to understand, what are we thinking? What are you thinking right now? Are your thoughts very positive in nature? Are they extremely negative in nature? Are they somewhere in between? Do you often find yourself making choices that aren't very positive to your well-being? Do you find yourself making choices and choosing people to hang out with that don't have your best intention at heart? Those are some signs that there's a negative broken record, negative broken pattern in your mind that's facilitating you to make these choices that do not help you, that do not resonate with your higher frequency. Powerful stuff here. And that negative broken record can lead us to wanting acceptance, to looking at different opportunities as validation. If we just get this, we'll be good. If I just achieve that, I'll be successful. If I just do this, fill in the blank. I've known some people that are addicted to money, and that they say to themselves, if I just get this much money, I'll be happy. And they're not ever happy, because they're never going to get there, because they keep moving it up. Unattainable. And I'm not saying to be complacent with your success or your life. I'm not saying just be complacent, be happy. You need to be happy with what you have, but complacency and being happy with what you have are two different things. Grateful and complacency are two different things, okay? So when you're grateful, it's different from being complacent. When we're grateful, we can still achieve new heights. When we're complacent, we don't do it. But we have to realize when that negative broken record is telling us that we're no good because we didn't achieve this or we didn't get this. Okay, we have to recognize when that's the case, because that negative broken record will tell us that if we really were good enough, we would have gotten X, Y, Z. And my last suggestion on Live Your True Life Perspectives for this show tonight is to really realize when you're not in the moment. If you're really living moment to moment, minute to minute, hour to hour, these things don't really become things. They actually become part of the landscape. So it's part of the daily deal. And so we really stop creating these expectations and we actually live through it. So it's no longer these expectations that let us down. It's actually like us living moment to moment to moment. Very powerful stuff. Very powerful. And it takes away that deflation, the devaluation when we don't get it, because we begin to see in real life, we begin to see in Dolby Digital and Technicolor where our life is and who we are. And we begin to identify by being in the moment and being within our own self and being comfortable in our own skin, what is good for us, what is not really necessarily good for us, and how to really keep on path to keep doing what we need to do, fighting the good fight and living the good life. And it takes consistency, mindfulness, and belief in self. And I believe in you. Stay tuned. Live Your True Life Perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. I'll be back this time, you know it, in 3 shakes.